The Texas plains stretched out under a sky the color of beaten copper. The rancher, Ethan McCall, rode hard through the coming dusk, his hat pulled low against the wind. He was heading back from town, a wagon load of supplies trailing behind, when he saw something that made him pull his horse up short. A figure on the side of the road. Small. Barely more than a shadow against the dying light. It was a little girl, maybe 7 or 8, her dress torn, dust caked to her cheeks. Her arms clutched a ragged doll like it was all she had left in the world. When she saw Ethan, she didn't flinch. Didn't run. She just stared at him with eyes too old for her face. He swung down from the saddle, boots crunching on gravel. "You lost, little one?" he asked gently. The girl blinked, then pointed to the low ridge behind her. Ethan followed her gaze, and his stomach turned cold. There, slumped against the rocks, was a woman. Young, but pale as death, her dress soaked through with blood. Ethan rushed over, dropping to one knee. The woman's breath was shallow. She tried to speak, but only a whisper came out. The girl knelt beside her, clutching her hand. Then came the words Ethan would never forget. "Can you take her instead of me?" the little girl whispered, tears cutting tracks in the dirt on her cheeks. Ethan froze. The woman stirred, her lips moving, but no sound came. The wind howled low across the plains, and for a long moment, Ethan couldn't speak. Then he did the only thing that made sense to him. He lifted the woman into his arms. "I'm taking both of you," he said, voice rough with something he couldn't name. As he rode toward his ranch with the girl clinging to his back and the dying woman in his arms, Ethan McCall didn't know it yet, but that question had changed his life forever. By the time Ethan reached the ranch, the sun had fallen, and the sky was black velvet scattered with stars. The little girl, Emma, he'd learned on the ride, clung to his back like a shadow. The woman in his arms was dead weight, her breath barely there. Ethan kicked the door open with his boot and carried her inside. The room was dim, lit only by the flicker of an oil lamp. He laid her on his bed, her head rolling to the side, and for a second, he feared she was gone. "Stay with me," he muttered, yanking a clean shirt from his trunk and tearing it into strips. Emma stood in the doorway, her eyes wide, silent as a ghost. Ethan heated water on the stove, cleaned the blood as best he could. The wound was a deep gash along the woman's ribs, ugly and raw. A knife wound, maybe. She'd lost too much blood, but she wasn't dead yet. "Emma," Ethan said, not looking at her. "Fetch me that jar of whiskey. Top shelf." The girl scrambled to obey, handing him the bottle with trembling hands. He soaked the cloth, pressed it against the wound. The woman jerked, a faint cry slipping from her lips. "That's good," Ethan whispered. "Means you're still in there." For the next hour. He worked in silence, his hands steady though his heart pounded like a hammer. When the bleeding slowed, he stitched her up as best as a rancher with no doctoring skills could. Then he sat back, exhausted, sweat dripping down his temples. Emma hadn't moved. She was standing there clutching her doll like it might save her soul. "Is she gonna die?" she whispered finally. Ethan met her gaze. "Not if I can help it." The girl's chin trembled, but she nodded. Ethan poured himself a shot of whiskey, downed it in one gulp, and then turned back to the woman. He didn't even know her name. All he knew was that someone had tried to kill her, and that someone might come looking. He banked the fire low, checked the doors and windows, and loaded his rifle. When he came back to the bedside, the woman's eyes were open. Just a little. "You shouldn't have," she rasped, her voice like sandpaper. "Save your breath," Ethan said. But she shook her head, and he had to lean close to hear her next words. "They'll come for me." Ethan felt the hair rise on the back of his neck. He didn't know who they were, but he knew one thing: he'd just invited a storm into his house. And by the look in Emma's eyes, the little girl knew it too. The woman slept most of the night, her breathing shallow but steady. Ethan sat in the chair by the bed, rifle across his knees, while Emma curled up on a blanket by the stove, hugging that ragged doll like it was the last safe thing in the world. When dawn broke, painting the plains in streaks of gold and crimson, the woman stirred. Ethan poured water into a tin cup and helped her drink. Up close, he saw her better, dark hair tangled with dust, sharp cheekbones, lips pale from blood loss, but her eyes, when they opened fully, burned with a fierce light. "You got a name?" Ethan asked quietly. "Clara," she whispered. "And, thank you." He gave a short nod. "You're hurt bad, Clara. You need a doctor." "No," her voice was sharp enough to cut. "No doctor. No sheriff." Ethan frowned. "You running from the law?" Clara's gaze hardened. "Worse." She glanced toward Emma, who was stirring awake. "Him." Ethan waited, jaw tight. "McGraw," Clara said finally, her voice trembling just enough to betray the fear beneath the steel. "He killed my husband. Took everything." Said Emma was next. Said. "I belong to him now." Ethan felt the words like a punch. McGraw. The name carried weight even out here, where law was just a word and men like him carved their own kingdoms with bullets. "You tried to get away," Ethan said. Clara nodded, tears slipping down her temples. "We rode for days. Thought maybe we'd outrun him." She looked at Emma, then back at Ethan. "But he'll come. He always does." Ethan leaned back in the chair, his mind already turning. If McGraw wanted Clara and the girl bad enough, he wouldn't just send a man or two. He'd bring a pack of wolves with rifles and greed in their eyes. "You should have kept riding," Ethan said, voice flat. "I couldn't," Clara whispered. Emma was starving. She couldn't go any farther. Emma looked at him then, her eyes wide and pleading in a way that cracked something inside him. Ethan stood, jaw clenched, and paced to the window. The prairie stretched wide and empty, but he felt the threat out there, creeping closer like a storm. "You're safe here," he said finally, surprising even himself. "As long as I'm breathing." Clara stared at him, like she didn't believe anyone would stick their neck out for her now. But Ethan meant it. He didn't ask for this fight, but it had found him. And if McGraw came riding into his land, he'd learn one thing: this rancher wasn't about to bend. Outside, the wind shifted. Hoofbeats were still far off. But they were coming. The day passed slow, too quiet for comfort. Ethan worked the corral like nothing was wrong, but his rifle stayed propped by the fence, and his ears strained for trouble. Clara helped where she could, pale but stubborn, while Emma followed the ranch dog like she belonged there. For a moment, Ethan almost believed this could last. Then came the dust. A low cloud on the horizon. Riders, dozens of them, cutting across the plains like a swarm of locusts. Ethan's stomach turned to iron. "Clara," he barked. She stepped out onto the porch, froze when she saw the line of horsemen bearing down. Her face drained of color. "It's him," she whispered. "McGraw." He rode at the front, tall in the saddle, a wolf's grin stretched under his black hat. At least 20 men fanned out behind him, rifles slung, pistols loose in their holsters. The sound of hooves shook the ground as they swept into the yard like a tide of violence. Ethan planted his boots in the dirt, shotgun across his arms. He didn't step back. Didn't blink. McGraw pulled up, dust rolling around him like smoke. His eyes crawled over Clara, then landed on Emma. That grin widened. "Well now," he drawled. "Look what I tracked down." Clara stepped closer to Emma, shielding her. "You're not taking her," she said, voice like steel. McGraw laughed, loud and cruel. "Sweetheart, you and that girl belong to me. Always have. Ethan's jaw tightened. Not anymore. McGraw's gaze cut to him. And who the hell are you? Man who says you turn around, Ethan said, calm as a loaded gun. The laughter died. Silence spread like wildfire. McGraw's grin twisted into something uglier. Boys, he said softly. Show him what happens to heroes. The first gun cracked before the word heroes was gone. Ethan dove for cover behind the trough as bullets chewed splinters from the rail. He came up firing, one blast from the shotgun, a rider tumbling out of the saddle like a sack of grain. Clara shoved Emma behind the porch rail, snatched the spare rifle Ethan left there, and fired like she'd been born to it. The crack of her shot split the chaos, dropping one of McGraw's men clean out of his stirrups. Horses screamed. Men shouted. Smoke filled the air as lead flew thick and fast. McGraw himself stayed back, watching from the saddle, teeth bared in something between rage and excitement. Burn it down, he roared. Two men charged for the barn, torches high, but Ethan was faster. He rolled, dropped one with a bullet to the chest, swung on the other and cut him down before the torch hit the straw. The yard became hell, gunfire, dust, the stench of powder choking the air. But Ethan fought like a man with something to lose for the first time in years. Clara fought like a woman with nothing left to give up. When the smoke cleared, half the riders were dead or dying. The rest broke, scattering into the plains like coyotes with tails between their legs. McGraw sat his horse, fury twisting his face. For a heartbeat, he looked ready to charge in himself. Then his eyes met Ethan's, cold, steady, unbroken. McGraw spat in the dust, yanked his reins, and wheeled away. Silence fell, broken only by the wind and the soft sob of a child clutching her mother. Ethan walked back slow, shotgun hanging loose in his grip. Clara looked at him, tears cutting through the grime on her cheeks. You didn't have to. Yeah, he said, voice low. I did. For the first time in years, Ethan felt something deep in his chest, not just the rush of survival, but a sense that maybe this fight had meaning. Maybe this ranch wasn't meant to stay empty. As the sun bled out over the Texas sky, Clara leaned against the porch rail, Emma asleep in her arms. You think he'll come back? She asked softly. Ethan stared out at the horizon, jaw hard. If he does, he said, he'll find out I ain't done fighting. That night, the prairie was quiet again, but nothing would ever be the same.